Welcome back to Jerusalem Minute. Josh Hasten here, correspondent for JNS News. I am here in studio with Alex Traiman, CEO of JNS. We are in Jerusalem, the heart of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. Alex, how's everything going, my man?
Doing well, Josh. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It seems that President Biden, every week that we come on this program, he seems to make more and more noise when it comes to Gaza. There are things going on all over the world, yet the focus of the president is Gaza, humanitarian aid, and the like. Biden went after specifically Prime Minister Netanyahu. We're going to play the clip here in a second. He said that the Prime Minister is hurting Israel more than he is helping Israel.
What's the come to Jesus part? Like, what tough love are you going to give to the Prime Minister?
What's happening is he has a right to defend Israel, a right to continue to pursue Hamas, but he must pay more attention to the innocent lives being lost as a consequence of the actions taken. He's hurting, in my view, he's hurting Israel more than helping Israel by making the rest of the world, it's contrary to what Israel stands for.
So Prime Minister Netanyahu over the weekend responded to President Biden.
Well, I don't know exactly what the president meant. But if he meant by that I'm pursuing private policies against the majority, the wish of the majority of Israelis, and that this is hurting the interests of Israel, then he's wrong on both counts.
So there you have it, Alex. Prime Minister Netanyahu is not backing down from the president of the United States. Obviously, Israel needs the support of the U.S. We need weapons in order to continue the battle to eradicate Hamas. But Netanyahu stood very strong up to the president.
Well, this isn't the first time that he's done it, and we've seen over and over again, whether it's direct quotes from Kamala Harris saying that you have to distinguish between the Israeli people and their government, or Biden saying that the government's the most extreme that Israel's ever had, or whether it's reports from anonymous sources claiming that Biden said that Netanyahu is an a-hole, or that he's a bad effing guy. Like, we're seeing a lot of stuff coming out of Biden's mouth and the people that are around him about Netanyahu. And Netanyahu has been taking it graciously until now. But I think that he understands that it's time for him to snap back. There's a new poll that just came out by the JPPI. It's one of the think tanks here in Israel that said that Israelis now perceive that Biden's support for Israel has diminished since the beginning of the war. And I think the most puzzling thing here is that Israel is an ally of the United States. And certainly there's a lot of policy differences, and everybody's been talking about policy differences between Israel and the United States for decades. So there's nothing new under the sun here, but that the United States and the president of the United States would openly be bashing the elected prime minister of an ally during a war that it did not start, right? The October 7th was not an Israeli imagined launch of an attack in the Gaza Strip. I mean, that came to Israel. Israel had no choice but to launch this war. And now in the middle of the war, Biden just publicly slamming Netanyahu over and over again. And what I think that the Biden administration doesn't realize is that Israelis are united around the goals of the war, which is to completely dismantle Hamas, to make sure that they're no longer in power in the Gaza Strip, not to accept an international diktat for a Palestinian state. And what the Biden administration really doesn't understand is that the more they're actually slamming Netanyahu, the stronger they're making him, and it makes him glue himself to his chair even more. So if their thought is to replace him, they're doing the exact opposite of what they hope for.
At the same time here, sticking on the same subject, Biden got caught on a hot microphone over the weekend after his State of the Union. We'll talk about that speech in a minute. But he said that Netanyahu had to have a come to Jesus moment.
I was telling your secretary, I was in Jordan and Israel this weekend, and we just, we got to keep pushing what you're doing on the humanitarian stuff and all this shit. So
I told him, baby, let me repeat this. I said, baby, you know I can't come to Jesus. Sir, just
He said he's going to have a come to Jesus moment on a hot mic with the head of the Jewish state. So this is the president of the United States right now. And honestly, what people are saying about the president of the United States these days and the gaffes that he's making, he's not looking so strong right now to a lot of people, both here in Israel and all around the world, and probably in the United States as well. So It's a little puzzling to hear how he's slamming and singling out one specific leader in the entire world, and that's Netanyahu.
And, come to Jesus, that phrase, JNS cited the Oxford English Dictionary, and you can interpret it in many ways, but according to Oxford, it's designated a person or group of people who encourage others to accept Christianity. So that's could be seen as a direct insult to the president, to the prime minister.
Yeah, that's not what he meant. Come to Jesus moment. It means, colloquially, it means that he's going to have to get with the program type of speech, but certainly not choosing his words wisely with the head of the Jewish state.
And then you had the State of the Union on Thursday night. Now let's go ahead and play a few clips from the State of the Union. He focused several minutes, at least, of his speech on the situation in Israel and Gaza.
Israel has the right to go after Hamas. Hamas ended this conflict by releasing hostages, laying down arms, could end it by releasing the hostages, laying down arms, and surrendering those responsible for October 7th. But Israel has Israel has a added burden because Hamas hides and operates among the civilian population like cowards, under hospitals, daycare centers, and all the like. Israel also has a fundamental responsibility, though, to protect innocent civilians in Gaza. This war has taken a greater toll on innocent civilians than all previous wars in Gaza combined. More than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, most of whom are not Hamas. Thousands and thousands of innocents, women and children, girls and boys, also orphaned. Nearly 2 million more Palestinians under bombardment or displacement. Homes destroyed, neighborhoods in rubble, cities in ruin, families without food, water, medicine. It's heartbreaking. I've been working nonstop to establish an immediate ceasefire that would last for 6 weeks to get all the prisoners released, all the hostages released, to get the hostages home and ease the intolerable and humanitarian crisis and build toward an enduring, something more enduring. The United States has been leading international efforts to get more humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Tonight, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day. And Israel must do its part. Israel must allow more aid into Gaza to ensure humanitarian workers aren't caught in the crossfire. And they're announcing they're going to have a crossing in northern Gaza. To the leadership of Israel, I say this: humanitarian assistance cannot be a secondary consideration or a bargaining chip. Protecting and saving innocent lives has to be a priority. As we look to the future, the only real solution to the situation is a two-state solution over time. As a lifelong supporter of Israel, my entire career, no one has a stronger record with Israel than I do. I challenge any of you here. I'm the only American president of Israel in wartime, but there is no other path that guarantees Israel's security and democracy. There is no other path that guarantees Palestinians can live in peace with peace and dignity. And there's no other path that guarantees peace between Israel and all of its neighbors, including Saudi Arabia, with whom I'm talking.
So then, if you take a look at that, the President of the United States talking about an emergency mission to establish a port off the Gaza Strip. He also, in addition to humanitarian aid, he also brought up, again, the issue of a two-state solution, saying that was the only viable way that both Israelis and Arabs in Gaza can have peace in this region is by a two-state solution. Again, and you had, for years, under the Trump administration, you had a completely different philosophy in terms of bringing peace between Arabs and Jews. For years, many said, you can't have, remember John Kerry's no, you can't have peace in this area until it starts with Israel and the Arabs under the PA, and that was proven to be wrong with Israel's peace deal with Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, and those other countries. and eventually Saudi Arabia. But they're going back to this old policy is the United States, whereas the focus is Israel and the Arabs living under PA control, claiming we can't have peace with all our other neighbors unless we settle this issue first.
Well, I also want to talk about the pier, but let's talk for a minute about the Palestinian state. It's very important. I did an interview this past week with former U.S. ambassador to the United States, a current minister of strategic affairs, and one of the 5 members of the narrow war cabinet in Israel, Ron Dermer, who is also a very close confidant of the prime minister, was a senior advisor for many years before being appointed ambassador to the United States. And he told me in the interview that he said anyone who is talking about a Palestinian state right now is living on another planet. Okay, so he is making it very clear that the Israeli government and the Israeli people who passed a resolution in the Knesset with 99 out of 120 seats, which excludes 11 Arabs, so it's almost unanimous among all the Jewish Knesset members, are against the idea of a Palestinian state being the reward for October 7th. Dermer talked about the idea that a Palestinian state right now would separate statehood from peace. And he talks about the Palestinian strategy. You can read this interview on JNS, and it shows that there's a very, very clear policy difference here between the United States and the state of Israel. But one thing that I was encouraged by is that the minister told me that Israel is going to do what they think they need to do, what's in their best interest. And if he said that if the United States was going to pass some kind of UN Security Council resolution, against Israel to force a ceasefire, that Israel will keep firing. They will keep fighting no matter what. And so, definitely a lot of confidence that Israel is taking the public brashing from the President of the United States with a grain of salt, and they're going to do what they need to do to win the war, because that's what they think that the Israelis want them to do, to win the war and not to have a Palestinian state created at this time.
So as we mentioned, there's in the U.S. idea of this floating pier and off the coast of Gaza in order to provide humanitarian aid. And we can argue that Israel, if we were going to provide humanitarian aid, a lot of people are against it, that Israel and the IDF should have been the ones actually distributing it so that Hamas doesn't hijack the aid. And now our own defense minister, Yoav Gallant, said that he backs this idea of a floating pier. He said somehow it will lead to the collapse of the Hamas regime. I don't necessarily understand how, what one has to do with another. How will a floating pier, which, by the way, is going to take months and months, and who knows, the war could be over by the time they get this pier up and about. I mean, I envision it as some sort of, I don't know, how those bouncy castles in the water that they have up near Tiberias, Tiberia, Aquacafs. You're going to set up some kind of multi-billion-dollar system as everything is going on. As Israel, we can talk about Rafah also. Israel's preparing to go to Rafah. I don't understand how Israel's accepting it. Maybe it's just a way to, to pacify Biden's comments from the State of the Union that we need a floating pier to distribute aid. I don't know why this is such a huge story and why our defense minister is actually going forward with it and saying this is actually going to help us defeat Hamas.
Well, yeah, there's a few things there. First is that the United States has been putting a lot of pressure since the very first moments of the war to be getting humanitarian aid into Gaza. And Israel's adopted a policy of bringing humanitarian aid in because they believe that the only way to maintain American support, French support, British support, German support for this war is to be facilitating humanitarian aid. And Israel is doing more than any country that is on one side of a war to be providing humanitarian aid to the other side. Okay, they're fighting against an enemy population and providing them food and water and medicine at the same time. But the United States has been putting a lot of pressure on Israel, saying that Israel's not doing enough to get humanitarian aid in. And we saw the scenes from just over a week ago where there was the stampede around a humanitarian aid truck. And these trucks are being co-opted by Hamas. Minister Dermer told me in the interview that he said, quote, "Believe me, Hamas will get the last pita in Gaza." That they are taking as much of the aid as possible. And instead of blaming Hamas for that, the United States is blaming Israel for not checking the aid fast enough. And even when Israel's saying, we're checking it, it's your problems of distribution. The UN is not distributing aid, and inside Gaza's problems of distributing aid. So the U.S. has now taken to airdrops. I was down in the south last week, and I saw these airdrops from the sky. You see all these parachutes coming down into the Gaza Strip. I haven't seen it confirmed, but a lot of media agencies reported that 5 people were killed by one of these major packages of food that came down, and you see one of them that the parachute did not open properly, just came down and killed people, including children. I'm sure there's not going to be a UN investigation into what happened there, but what the pier does is it kind of alleviates the pressure on Israel. Israel's basically saying, America, you're making humanitarian aid a big deal. You want to bring in aid? Bring in as much aid as you want. Stop blaming us, okay? Like we're fighting the war. We're facilitating as much as we can. You want to get more in? Build a pier. But I think the thing that's very interesting about a pier is that the same pier that can be built to allow goods to come in can also be allowed. It can also facilitate passengers leaving. And the big problem in Gaza right now is people don't have where to live. Okay, if there's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, there is. I mean, and Hamas brought it upon itself. There's a crisis there, and we know we talked about it many weeks ago on the show. The idea of Palestinians being able to leave the Gaza Strip. Egypt has been very strict. They said our border is closed to refugees. We don't want them in Egypt. That's what Egypt said. And so how do you get them out? Well, a pier is a possible way.
Yeah, but you and I are talking about Egypt, yet the world community is not talking about Egypt. And I think, ironically, it was an Egyptian parcel that was delivered to Gaza via a parachute, which didn't open. That's what I heard, which hit somebody or hit a family in the head, killing 5 or 6 people. But Egypt it's like it doesn't even exist. They're not even talking about Egypt. They're not giving that as a possibility. In every other war in the world, you have humanitarian access to other countries. Egypt is not on the agenda.
Egypt doesn't want to get stuck with the entirety of the population there, right? So the idea of a pier is that you might get into a situation where countries like Turkey says, okay, we'll take 10,000 or we'll take 50,000. So in Europe or other places or in Africa, they say, okay, we'll take, and then the ships can come up and they can take people that want to leave. And I'm certain, while the Israeli government is not making calls for people to leave, that's not their policy. But I am certain that there are Gazans in the Strip that would be very, very happy to leave and to start their lives in another place.
I think that was actually the case even before the war started. You had an issue of immigration, people wanting to leave Gaza, not living under Hamas. It makes complete sense to me why people would not want to live under the brutal Hamas regime. And that being said, time and time again, going back to the Biden administration and others, as we enter Ramadan, and I want to talk about Ramadan in a few minutes here, but Rafah, the southernmost point in Gaza, that time and time again has been described as a red line by the Biden administration and others. In other words, Israel at this point, according to the international community, does not have a green light to go into Rafah, especially during Ramadan. Yet we all know here in Israel that Israel must finish the job, and finishing the job involves a military operation in Rafah in order to rid Israel and the world of the remaining Hamas terrorists, and at the same time, hopefully find some of the hostages, because most likely that is where they're being held. Yet, as we have been saying now, the U.S. is kind of putting a kibosh, or trying to at least, on an Israeli military operation, time and time again, saying that is a red line, that is unacceptable.
Yeah, this is really the first time since the ground operation began that the United States is saying you do not have a green light to proceed. I think it's very important to note that it's not just a red line, it's a red light. Israel's trying to figure out how to do that. I think that they're going to go through this red light if it doesn't turn to green at some point very, very soon. There was talks that perhaps Israel and Hamas would reach some kind of agreement on a temporary ceasefire, which would enable getting hostages out. They were talking about maybe 40 hostages coming out. And we don't know how many hostages of the 136 that are remaining that were kidnapped on October 7th, how many of them are alive. Hamas would not provide a list to Israel of how many hostages they still have in captivity, and probably that's because Many of them, unfortunately, are dead.
Yeah, they say, just not to interrupt you, but they say they don't know how many hostages there are yet. They are convinced somehow they're able to put together the number 30,000 in terms of the number who were killed in Gaza. That a lot of people are talking about that. That number they know.
Yeah, the article at Tablet questioning those numbers. It's a good read. It's not going to happen. There's not going to be a ceasefire deal now. They talked about doing something before Ramadan. Ramadan has already started. We already saw last night first videos coming out of like Palestinians racing on or off the Temple Mount and being confronted by Israeli police as they were, I think there could be a lot of confrontations during Ramadan. We'll talk about it, but this Rafah operation is very important. Israel and they have announced publicly that they've taken out 18 of the 24 battalions, and they clarified that when you talk about destroying a battalion, it means that you've killed or injured 50% of the members of that battalion, that there are 24 organized battalions, and there's 6 to go, and they're in Rafah. Okay, and so what Minister Dermer told me, he said anybody that doesn't want Israel to go into Rafah wants Israel to lose the war. So they are convinced that they must go in. They're looking for ways to move some of these civilians that are now housed temporarily in that city to get them out so that they can go into all these buildings. And this week I was also in the command and control center of the war in the south, just outside of Gaza. And I was asking some of the people that were working in the room where they ordered the various strikes by the air artillery and the Navy, and I asked the question, I said, how many of the buildings inside the Gaza Strip are you finding weapons, tunnels? And the girl who was working there, she told me, we're finding weapons in 90% of the buildings. That it really, you understand why Israel is going door to door to door, house to house, going into these buildings, and they have to do it in Rafah as well.
I think we've had enough about talking about the U.S. government, but I want to emphasize a point you made. The Vice President of the United States, as she said, Kamala Harris, it's important for us to distinguish or at least not conflate the Israeli government with the Israeli people. It seems in that statement is she's trying to draw some sort of wedge here in Israel between the people and the government, saying, no, we have nothing against the Israeli people. It's only your crazy right-wing government. This is Netanyahu. You don't know how many times on Twitter I see it's Netanyahu's war, and those who hate Israel, stop the funding to the Netanyahu government, right-wing extreme. All of that. And I think that her comments are completely unacceptable. The will of the Israeli people, the majority, have said clearly, that we need to finish Hamas.
And Dermer was close to Netanyahu. He told me, he said, you're hearing a lot of talk about Netanyahu, and his coalition. He said it's a code word for Israel because Netanyahu's policies are supported by the overwhelming majority of the country. So if they're saying the problem is Netanyahu and Netanyahu wants to go into Rafah, but the entire country wants the IDF to finish the war and go into Rafah, it's Netanyahu, he's the one blocking a Palestinian state, but the entirety of Israel does not want there to be a Palestinian state at this time. When they're saying Netanyahu, what they're doing is they are scapegoating him. Really, they don't support the policies that are supported by the entire nation of Israel. And they do want him out because they know that what might be on the flip side of a Netanyahu administration is somebody that they can more easily push and maneuver around.
So it is Ramadan Kareem, as you say, the sacred month for reflection and renewal. That's what it's supposed to be. And unfortunately, over the years here in Israel, we've seen that Ramadan has been hijacked in order to carry out more and more terrorist attacks against Israel and the Jewish people. Last night already, images of confrontations between the Israeli police trying to maintain order and worshipers who were on the Temple Mount. I believe on the first night, it was limited to males over the age of 40 and women. But, the U.S., again, we've talked about the fact that they don't want Israel doing anything in Rafah during Ramadan. President Biden saying he was concerned about violence breaking out in so-called East Jerusalem during this time. I mean, do you think that's a self-fulfilling prophecy? Again, history shows that Ramadan has always been a time of conflict. And I'd like to show a screenshot, if we can, and I'd like to talk about it, the president's message to the Muslim world on Ramadan. I'll get to that in a second. But do you think that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, talking about concerns of violence? Does that automatically not give a green light, but does that lead people to go out into the streets and fulfill that self-fulfilling prophecy?
There's no question that Hamas is looking at Ramadan and specifically the gathering of Muslims on the Temple Mount as the possibility for the second round after October 7th. If you go back to 2021, the last time there was a flare-up between Israel and Gaza, nothing like what we saw on October 7th, but there was a flare-up. There was lots of rockets. Israel was firing back. We saw Muslims during the month of Ramadan rallying and rioting on the Temple Mount, storming inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque and using it, firing, throwing stones, firing incendiary devices out at Israeli police that maintain security on the Mount, putting up huge billboards in supporting Hamas on the Temple Mount, which is ironic because we saw just a couple weeks ago somebody going to the Hajj in Mecca and taking out a Palestinian flag, and she was arrested on the spot. And here you have Hamas in the past, using the Temple Mount to blast political messaging and billboards and posters, and certainly the imams on the mosque are inciting the population to violence, and then they get all incited, and they're hot, and the month of Ramadan is an intense time, and they're not eating during the day, and they're angry, and then the fear is that they go off the mount and then they carry out acts of violence.
Yeah, again, time for reflection, but unfortunately it somehow turns when it comes to Jews and when it comes to Israel.
You've had people that say, jihad means self-reflection, right? People will tell you that. And on the American college campuses, you'll hear that refrain and stuff like this. So that's not what jihad means. Jihad means attacking the people that you think are infidels. And here the closest infidels are Jews.
And getting back to that statement, President Biden, I have it here on my phone, his wishes for Ramadan. I'm not going to read the whole thing out here. We'll show a screenshot, rather, of it here. He said more than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, most of them civilians, including thousands of children, using Hamas statistics. And Eugene Gontarovich from the Kohelet Policy Forum, he had a good response on Twitter as saying, Mr. President, have you talked about any other violence in terms of Ramadan, wishing peace to Muslims around the world? Have you mentioned violence in Afghanistan or in any other countries around the world? It seems like you're exclusively, once again, focused on Israel, using a message for a holiday and making Israel look bad through that message.
And this is really all about trying to appease voters ahead of the election. You had 11% of voters voting uncommitted in Michigan, and them using that as a way to explain that they need to do more to appease the Muslim voters there, even though I saw a statistic that a similar number of people voted uncommitted during the primaries when Barack Obama was running for president. I'm not sure, where's the chicken and where's the egg in this? Is Biden's policies towards Israel shifting because they want to appease Muslim voters, or do they want different policies against Israel, and therefore they are now pinning the blame on their shifting policies towards trying to appease Muslim voters?
So, Alex, in May 2021, Hamas and other terror groups in Gaza launched rockets at Israel. So we've seen how they operated in the past, but in May 2021, Israeli Arabs got involved in the violence. And there's a fear now that Israeli Arabs may once again get involved. They've essentially stayed out of things until now. But it was clear for publication yesterday that as part of a joint operation of the Israel Security Forces and the Northern District Police, 13 Arabs, a cell, had plotted to carry out multiple terrorist attacks. And that was revealed yesterday. Do you think that it's a possibility? Israeli Arabs, again, quiet for the last 4 or 5 months. Is a possibility that we have to worry about Israeli Arabs carrying out attacks here in Israel now?
I think that's the big threat now with the beginning of Ramadan also, is that this population can be incited. And we've seen intifada-style violence emerge, specifically during this quote-unquote Islamic holy month of Ramadan. And Israelis were shocked to the core in 2021 when they saw all of a sudden the Israeli Arab population rioting. One of the big developments over the last several years has been the distribution of assault rifles among Israeli Arabs, both in Judea and Samaria, those in Judea and Samaria, as well as the Israeli Arabs inside with Israeli citizenship or residency in Jerusalem and Ramallah, Lod, Haifa, Yaffo, other cities. And there's a major danger that aside from just rioting and where we saw the destruction of synagogues and the overturning of cars, is that you could start to see mass shooting events taking place. It's a very, very real threat. The Israeli police, since 2021, have been trying to, quote unquote, mow the grass and take out the inciters and the leaders that led to that violence. They've done a good job, and that might be the reason why we haven't seen it until now. But this is a tinderbox, and it's a question of whether or not Israeli Arabs value what they have as members of the Israeli economy, or if they are that incited over what's happened in Gaza that they want to take action themselves.
Again, to clarify, we've seen terrorist attacks being carried out by Arabs living in the PA-controlled territories in Judea and Samaria. And now, after this revelation here by the Israeli police, this potentially could be another front that Israel has to deal with. We're already dealing with the south. We're dealing with Hezbollah in the north. And now potentially the Israeli Arabs could come into the picture. At the same time, in the Middle East, we have the Houthis. They're at it again. They're attacking U.S. targets. U.S. naval targets, according to this report. Houthi forces in Yemen claim to have launched one of their largest attacks on U.S. shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, saying they sent 37 drones to hit U.S. Navy warships and a commercial ship. So, again, since October the 7th, we've seen the Houthis attacking Western targets in the Red Sea, attacking ships, attacking different vessels, threatening Israel, firing rockets and missiles at Israel, and now a large-scale attack, 37 drones sent to attack a U.S. target in the Red Sea.
Well, meanwhile, they've almost cut off much of the shipping that goes through the Suez Canal, which is one of the world's most traveled waterways. It connects Asia to Europe, and all the goods that are manufactured in China on their way to Europe, on the way to Israel, even to the United States, go through the Suez Canal. The Houthis have basically rendered the canal almost worthless because they're attacking commercial vessels. Major vessels, carriers will not go through. The Red Sea will not go through that canal. And that, in the past, would be a cause for war. But that by itself, and the United States has had some attacks on Yemen trying to send a message. Clearly, the message has not been sent strongly enough. But all it would take is for one of these drones to hurt one of these naval vessels, and you could see a full-scale escalation between the United States, British, that also are part of this five-country group that's supposed to be protecting the Red Sea. And you could see a major, major escalation with Yemen.
U.S. servicemen have been killed over the last month or two or so, and the president made it clear during his State of the Union, President Biden, during his State of the Union address, that he would not tolerate attacks by the Houthis or others trying to close the waterways.
And important to explain again that the thread that binds Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis is Iran. Iran is the one pulling all the strings. Iran is the one funding all of these terror proxies throughout the region that have created a ring of fire around the state of Israel. And until the head of the octopus, which is Iran, gets dealt with, you're going to continue to have various terror proxies spring up throughout the entire Middle East.
We're almost out of time here. We just want to finish with one more story here, I guess, which ties to the social fabric of the state of Israel and the Jewish people, and that is the issue of the ultra-Orthodox serving in the army. There were reports on Saturday night. The chief Sephardic rabbi of the state of Israel, Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef, he sparked controversy with remarks saying that if the ultra-Orthodox would be forced to be drafted into the IDF, then they would pick up and move. They would leave the state of Israel and go take their business elsewhere, so to speak, actually learn Torah elsewhere. And this has been a debate for many, many years in the state of Israel. Should all the residents of the state of Israel serve in the army? Should they do some sort of compulsory service, whether it's a year of volunteer work, essentially? Should they give back to the state of Israel? Or should they be allowed to learn Torah, which some say is as equally as important as fighting in the army or volunteering or taking part in some of these other initiatives to better the well-being of the state of Israel? At the same time, you have others who are saying that this isn't even a story. This is just propaganda against a certain group of people to take focus off what's going on in Gaza, the war effort or whatnot, and people are picking on the ultra-Orthodox. What's your take on this whole situation here?
Well, all things can be true at the same time. This is certainly a focus-tested topic that does anger a lot of Israelis, and particularly during wartime when people have their brothers, sons, daughters, husbands fathers in Gaza fighting for their lives, and you have the Haredi population by and large sitting it out. Now, there are many, many religious that serve. There are some Haredi that serve, but national religious serve in very large numbers. Chabad sends their kids to the military, and we're seeing that the overwhelming number of young officers are religious, and even some of the highest percentages of those killed in the fighting are part of the national religious community. So it's not that people that are religious don't serve, but there are communities that don't want to serve. Part of it has to do with the social fabric, as you mentioned, of the military itself, that it's not a place that is befitting of religious men, that there's interaction with young girls, with guns that are gorgeous, walking around teaching the others how to shoot, and the rabbis don't want that. Also, there's no contradiction between learning Torah and serving in the army. If there was really a will to get the ultra-Orthodox population into the army, they could create different structures that would enable several hours a day of learning and several hours a day of serving, particularly in peacetime. Obviously, during a war, everything's out the window and you just got to fight to win. But most of the Israeli population is upset that the Haredim, which are a quickly growing percentage of the population, are refusing to serve. They all want them to serve in the army, to serve with the state, give back to the state the same way that they do. But you're seeing growing numbers that are joining, and this is an issue that can be solved. I think that there's a will to solve it. I also think that it's important that we should have religious soldiers in the military, so that when you have people serving in places like in Hebron, where the Cave of the Patriarchs is, or in Shechem, where the tomb of Joseph is located, that they understand why they're fighting and defending those places. So I think it's a strategic imperative to get the religious into the army, but the question is how, and it needs to be done sensitively, and it needs to be done with more carrots than sticks. But these comments by the chief rabbi that says that the religious will take themselves to go learn elsewhere. I think that there's a lot of Israelis that are just saying to themselves, hey, if you don't want to serve, go take your life someplace else.
Yeah, and that's really unfortunate. But, I think Torah study is, and personally, I think it's invaluable. With that being said, if you look at the Bible, if you go all the way back to the Bible, you saw whether it was Joshua or Moses or any of the leaders of the Jewish people, there was a time for war, there was a time for peace, there was a time to learn, and there was a time to take up arms, and this is certainly a time to take up arms right now. I think we'll have to come to some sort of agreement. I mean, it's been so many years this has been on the agenda, the issue. And again, and personally, I don't know if it has to be IDF service, but I think everyone who's a member of the State of Israel has to give it back in some way. If you have citizenship, that comes with responsibility, giving back to the State of Israel in some way. And again, this will be debated, I'm sure, for a lot longer as we go further. And that's all the time we have today. Coming to you from Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the State of Israel, the Jewish people. My name is Josh Hasten, here with Alex Traiman. Make sure you check out all of the amazing content on JNS TV, on YouTube, as well as the website, jns.org, for all the latest news and views from Israel and the Middle East, coverage that you're just not going to get anywhere else, folks. So thanks so much. Continue to pray for the well-being of the State of Israel, the Jewish people, and our brave soldiers who are on the front lines. Have a great week, everybody. Be safe.